She was compelled to wed the millionaire who abducted her. But what happened next astonished everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. A storm rolled over the coast that night, the wind howling through the cliffs as if warning her not to step closer. Elena Carter's wrists were still red from the ropes that had been cut only minutes ago. She could taste salt on her lips, part tears, part sea air. When the car door slammed behind her, she saw the mansion for the first time. It stood like a fortress of glass and stone, lit by flashes of lightning, cold and impossible to escape. A tall man waited at the top of the marble stairs. His black suit was dry despite the rain, his expression calm but unreadable. He looked at her the way one studies a painting, searching for flaws. "Miss Carter," he said, his deep voice steady, "you are safe now. No one will hurt you again." Elena's breath shook. "Safe? You had me taken off the street?" He stepped closer, and the light revealed his face. Adrian Vale. She recognized him instantly, the millionaire owner of Vale Dynamics, the man whose company had destroyed her career. She had seen his face on magazine covers, always described as brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. "I had no choice," Adrian said. "There were people after you. The only way to keep you alive is to make you my wife." Elena froze, rain dripping from her hair onto the polished floor. "What did you just say?" "Marry me," he said simply, as if it were an ordinary business transaction. "For 1 year. It will protect you from those who want you silenced." Her laugh came out like a broken sob. "You think I am going to marry the man who ruined my life?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "If you walk out that door, they will find you before sunrise. I can offer you protection, a new identity, and the resources to clear your name. In return, you sign this." "Oh." He opened a folder on the table. Inside was a marriage certificate already filled out. Her name printed in perfect letters. A pen rested beside it. "This is insane," she whispered. "Insane or necessary," he said quietly. "You decide." Thunder cracked above them. For a moment, Elena saw her reflection in the glass wall, drenched, trembling, cornered. She thought of her mother's hospital bills, the lawsuit that had ruined her, the men who had followed her car for days. The fear in her chest was a living thing. Adrian's tone softened, but his words remained sharp. "You have every right to hate me, Miss Carter. But if you trust me tonight, I will make sure you live to hate me tomorrow." Her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. The paper blurred through her tears. When the nib touched the line beside his name, she whispered, "You win." Adrian exhaled slowly, almost as if he had been holding his breath all this time. He signed the witness line, closed the folder, and said, "From this moment, you are Mrs. Vale." He turned toward the door, gesturing for her to follow. "Your room is upstairs. Dinner is at 7 o'clock. Someone will bring you dry clothes." Elena remained standing in the hallway, staring after him as his footsteps echoed through the mansion. Each sound was measured, deliberate, and final. She had entered as a free woman, and now carried a stranger's last name. Outside, the storm grew louder. Inside, the only sound was the quiet beating of her heart and the faint click of a lock turning somewhere down the hall. Morning sunlight broke through the heavy curtains, painting golden stripes across the floor of the guest room. Elena opened her eyes to silence. For a moment, she thought last night had been a nightmare, the storm, the mansion, the contract. But then she saw the white dress hanging on the chair beside her bed and the gold ring on her finger. Reality hit like a wave. She had married Adrian Vale, the millionaire who had destroyed her career, and there was no undoing it. The door creaked open. A housekeeper entered quietly, carrying a tray of breakfast, black coffee, scrambled eggs, a glass of orange juice. "Good morning, Mrs. Vale," she said gently. Elena's throat tightened at the title. Mrs. Vale. She forced a small nod. Downstairs, the mansion was calm, almost too calm. The sound of her footsteps echoed through marble halls, lined with portraits of serious men in dark suits. She followed the smell of coffee to a sunlit dining room where Adrian sat behind a newspaper. His suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, every gesture deliberate. He looked up when she entered, his blue eyes unreadable. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." Elena folded her arms. "You mean after being forced to sign a marriage certificate in the middle of a thunderstorm?" He set the newspaper aside. "Forced is not the word I would use. Persuaded, perhaps. You are safe here, Mrs. Vale." "Stop calling me that," she snapped. "You think a ring can erase what your company did to me?" Adrian's expression hardened. "Vale Dynamics did not steal your artwork, Miss Carter. You were framed. The evidence was planted by a man named Colin Rayner, my former head of marketing. He has powerful friends who will not let you expose him. That is why you were being followed." Elena froze. The name hit her like a punch. Colin Rayner. The same man who had once promised to help her sell her designs, then disappeared the moment she was accused of fraud. Adrian continued, his tone quiet but firm. "If you had been arrested, you would have disappeared without a trace. My name and this marriage are the only shields strong enough to keep you alive while I gather proof." "Oh?" Elena sank into the chair across from him. "You mean this marriage is just another business deal?" "Every deal has two sides," he replied. "You protect your life. I protect my company from scandal." She looked down at her hands, the gold ring gleaming under the sunlight. "What happens after 1 year?" Adrian met her eyes. "We sign the annulment. You get your freedom back. I get silence from the board. Until then, we act as husband and wife in public. That means attending events together, living under this roof, and following a few simple rules." He slid a folder toward her. Inside was a list written in neat black ink. No public arguments. No outside communication without security approval. No press interviews. No leaving the property without permission. Elena's voice trembled. "You are unbelievable." Adrian leaned back, his tone steady. "You can hate me all you want. But as of this morning, every person in the world believes you are my wife. The safest place for you is right here." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the ocean crashed against the rocks below the cliff. Elena's heart pounded with anger, fear, and something she did not want to name. After a long pause, Adrian spoke again, softer this time. "I will not lock you in. Explore the house. Get some rest. Dinner is at 7 o'clock. We will discuss the details then." He stood and left the room, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Elena stared at the untouched breakfast. The food smelled wonderful, but her stomach twisted too tightly to eat. She rose and wandered through the mansion, the library filled with old books, the grand piano covered in dust, the balcony overlooking miles of sea. Everything screamed wealth and isolation. She stopped by a glass wall that faced the water. The sky had cleared, but the waves still looked violent, restless. In the reflection, she saw a woman she barely recognized, pale, shaken, wearing silk instead of canvas. For the first time since her father's death, she whispered a prayer she did not finish. Somewhere deep inside, a voice answered, "You are not broken yet. You survived worse than this." Elena straightened her shoulders. If Adrian Vale thought she would live quietly under his control, he was wrong. She might have signed that contract, but she would find her own truth inside this gilded prison. The mansion might belong to a millionaire, but her spirit was still her own. The days that followed moved with a strange rhythm. The mansion felt like a museum where everything was too perfect, too silent, and Elena was the only living exhibit. Each morning she found a note from Adrian on the table, written in his exact handwriting. "Breakfast at 8, meeting at 10, do not leave the property." His schedule ran like clockwork, and so did hers, except her hours were spent pacing the halls, sketching on scraps of paper, and pretending she did not care. On the fourth morning, she entered the study to find him behind the desk, surrounded by files and the glow of a computer screen. The air smelled of coffee and cedar. Without looking up, he said, "You are awake early." Elena crossed her arms. "It is hard to sleep when you live in a mansion full of cameras." He finally raised his eyes. "The security is for your protection. The men who chased you before have not disappeared." "I feel like a prisoner," she said quietly. Adrian set down his pen. "You are alive, Mrs. Vale. That is more than they wanted for you." The words hung between them, heavy and sharp. She wanted to argue, but the truth in his tone stopped her. Instead, she turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, The ocean crashed against the cliffs, endless and cold. He studied her for a moment, then gestured to a folder on the corner of his desk. "This is what I have so far. Evidence of who framed you. It is not enough yet, but it is a start." Elena hesitated before picking it up. Inside were photographs, contracts, and email prints. Her heart skipped as she saw a familiar signature, Colin Rayner. The man who had once promised to sponsor her art exhibition. The same man who vanished when the accusations began. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Because I built this company to stand for innovation and honesty. If I let corruption stay under my name, I become the same as them." Elena stared at him, trying to see the man behind the mask of power. For a brief second, she thought she did tired eyes, a flicker of guilt, and something like loneliness. But the moment passed quickly as he returned to his papers. That evening, she found herself exploring again. The west wing of the mansion was dim, the air filled with the faint scent of dust and sea salt. At the end of the corridor, she discovered a door slightly open. Inside was a room she had never seen before, a private art studio. The walls were lined with canvases, sketches, and half-finished portraits. Some were clearly professional, others raw and personal. One painting stopped her cold. It was of a young woman standing by the ocean, her face turned away from the light. The brushstrokes were delicate, careful, almost reverent. She touched the edge of the frame. The signature at the bottom read, A. Vale. Footsteps behind her made her jump. Adrian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I should have locked that room," he said. "You painted these?" she asked. He nodded once. "A long time ago, before everything became numbers and deals." Elena turned back to the painting. "She looks like someone you lost." Adrian's jaw tightened. "She was my brother's fiancée. She died in a car accident 10 years ago. He never recovered, and neither did I." The confession was quiet but raw. For the first time, she saw not the cold millionaire who dictated her life, but a man haunted by the past. "I am sorry," she said gently. He looked at her then, his gaze steady. "Do not be. Pain teaches you who you can trust, and who you cannot." Later that night, as Elena sat by the window of her room, she replayed his words. The house no longer felt like a cage, but a puzzle, each room holding a clue to the man she had married. He was arrogant, controlling, impossible, but beneath all that, she sensed something broken, something she was beginning to understand. Rain began again, tapping softly against the glass. In her sketchbook, she drew the sea, then the portrait of Adrian as she had seen him in that dim light. Strong shoulders, distant eyes, and a faint shadow of grief. When she finished, she wrote one sentence beneath it. "Even the strongest walls hide something fragile." Downstairs, Adrian paused outside her door, listening to the scratch of her pencil. For the first time in years, he did not feel alone. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their strange marriage began to change. The house that once echoed with silence now carried faint traces of life. The kitchen smelled of coffee each morning, the piano in the hall no longer sat untouched, and sometimes, when the staff was gone, laughter even found its way into the marble corridors. Elena still did not trust Adrian completely, but the walls between them had begun to crack. He no longer barked orders across the table. He asked questions. He listened. Sometimes they shared dinner without words, and silence felt less like punishment, more like peace. One afternoon, Adrian asked her to join him in the library. When she arrived, he stood beside a large mirror, holding a small jewelry box. "It is time we make your role believable," he said with a faint smile. Inside the box was a necklace of white pearls, simple but elegant. "I do not need this," she said. "It is not a gift," he replied. "It is a disguise. We will be attending the Vale Foundation Gala tomorrow night. People will expect the wife of a millionaire to look the part." The next evening, the mansion's long driveway shimmered under golden lights. Elena's reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable, a satin gown, hair pinned neatly, a face that belonged to someone confident and untouchable. Adrian appeared behind her, fastening the clasp of the necklace himself. His hands brushed her skin for a second longer than necessary, and she felt her heartbeat stumble. "You look perfect," he said quietly. At the gala, cameras flashed as they entered the grand ballroom. Reporters swarmed with microphones, guests whispered, and music filled the air. Elena felt like an actress in someone else's story. She held Adrian's arm tightly, hoping no one could see the tremor in her hand. During the dinner, she noticed people watching them, business partners, journalists, investors. Adrian spoke smoothly about new projects and charity funds, his charm effortless. But then a woman approached their table, her voice sharp and cold. "Is this the artist accused of theft?" Elena's blood ran cold. The murmurs spread like wildfire. The same scandal that had destroyed her reputation now hung in the air again. Adrian rose from his seat, his tone calm but firm. "That accusation was false," he said. "My wife's designs were stolen by someone inside my company. Anyone who questions her integrity questions mine." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward them. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, steady and warm. Later, in the car ride home, neither spoke for a long time. The city lights flickered through the tinted glass. Finally, Elena whispered, "You did not have to defend me." Adrian's gaze stayed on the road. "Yes, I did. Because it was the truth." The words sank into the quiet between them. For the first time, Elena believed him. When they reached the mansion, she stepped out of the car and looked back at him. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were softer than before. The rain had stopped, and the night air smelled of salt and jasmine. As she entered the house, she realized something she had not expected. Somewhere between the lies and the contract, she no longer saw Adrian Vale as the man who had ruined her life, but as the man who might save it. The following morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the breakfast room. Elena sat at the table, stirring her coffee without tasting it. The echoes of the gala still lingered in her mind, the flashing cameras, the cruel question, and Adrian's voice rising above the noise to defend her name. It had been the first time anyone had stood up for her since her world had fallen apart. Adrian entered quietly, dressed in a dark suit, his tie already knotted. "You handled yourself well last night," he said. "I am proud of you." She looked up, startled by the word proud. "You make it sound like we are a real couple." He smiled faintly. "Maybe we are better at pretending than we thought." For the first time, the air between them felt easy. They shared breakfast without tension, trading small talk about the ocean view and the new painting hanging in the hall. Yet under the calm surface, Elena felt something shifting, something she was not ready to name. Later that day, Adrian invited her to his private office, overlooking the sea. On the desk lay a set of blueprints and a file stamped Vale Foundation. Community Art Program. "I am launching this project in 2 weeks," he explained. "Art classes for underprivileged children. It was your idea from our first conversation. I would like you to lead it." Elena blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "You want me to run it?" He nodded. "You are the reason I remembered why creativity matters. You see people, not numbers. That is something I lost a long time ago." Her heart swelled with warmth and fear all at once. "Why are you doing this for me?" Adrian's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because every time I try to fix something broken, I see myself in you." For a moment, neither spoke. The waves crashed against the rocks below, filling the silence between them. When he finally looked at her, the distance that once defined them was gone. For the first time since the contract began, they were no longer two strangers under one roof. They were two hearts learning how to breathe in the same rhythm. The evening before the project launch arrived, with a soft rain that brushed against the windows like whispered warnings. The mansion glowed with golden light, the scent of sea and roses drifting in from the garden. Elena stood by the grand piano, tracing her fingers across the keys. She had not played in years, but tonight the silence felt too heavy to bear. Adrian entered quietly. He carried 2 glasses of wine and set them on the piano. "You should be resting," he said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." "I could not sleep," she replied. "It feels like everything is changing too quickly." He studied her face, the way the lamplight caught in her hair. "Change can be terrifying," he said softly, "but sometimes it is the only thing that saves us." She turned toward him. "You sound like a man who has been through it." He hesitated, then nodded. "When my brother died, I told myself I would never let emotions control me again. I built my life on order, logic, and deals. It kept me safe, but it also kept me alone. Elena listened in silence. The rain tapped gently against the glass like a heartbeat. He took a step closer. "When I met you, I thought protecting you was just another problem to solve. But I was wrong. You were the reminder that I am still human." Her breath caught. "Adrian." He reached for her hand but stopped halfway, as if afraid the gesture might break whatever fragile peace they had built. "You do not owe me anything," he said quietly. "Not gratitude, not forgiveness. But I needed you to know why I did all this." Elena felt her chest tighten. For months she had tried to hate him, but in that moment, all she saw was a man haunted by his own walls. She took his hand and placed it over her heart. "You cannot save everyone," she said, "but you saved me." They stood there for a long time, the space between them dissolving into quiet understanding. The storm outside grew louder, wind rattling the tall windows. Later that night, unable to sleep, Elena wandered to the art room, the one filled with his old paintings. She lit a single candle and studied the portrait of the woman by the sea. For the first time, she noticed something she had missed before. Another figure hidden in the background, blurred by shadow. It was Adrian himself, standing at a distance, watching the woman with longing he could never express. Footsteps approached behind her. Adrian stood in the doorway once more, his voice a low murmur. "I painted that after the accident. I could not let her go, so I trapped her on canvas." Elena turned to him. "And now?" He exhaled slowly. "Now I am trying to learn how to let go." She smiled sadly. "Maybe you do not need to let go. Maybe you just need to make space for something new." For a moment, the air seemed to still. Then he closed the distance between them, his forehead resting gently against hers. The candlelight flickered, throwing soft shadows across the room. Neither spoke. There were no contracts or obligations left in that silence, only two broken hearts learning to trust the sound of the rain and each other. The next morning dawned calm and clear, the sea below shining like glass. It was the day of the Vale Foundation launch, the day Adrian had promised would mark a new beginning for both of them. Elena dressed carefully, choosing a simple white dress rather than the elegant gowns the staff had laid out. She wanted to look like herself, not the illusion the world expected her to be. By noon, the ballroom had filled with guests, reporters, and photographers. Banners of the new community art program hung from the walls. Children from local schools had been invited to display their drawings, and their laughter filled the air. For the first time in a long while, Adrian looked at peace. As Elena moved among the guests, she overheard compliments and flashes of admiration. It felt unreal to be respected again. Then she caught sight of a face she had hoped never to see: Colin Rayner, the man who had framed her, shaking hands with board members near the stage. Her pulse quickened. She turned toward Adrian, who was deep in conversation with a senator. Before she could reach him, a reporter stepped in front of her, microphone raised. "Mrs. Vale, there are rumors circulating that this program is just a publicity stunt to distract from the accusations against you and your husband. How do you respond?" The question struck like a slap. Cameras turned toward her, flashing brightly. Adrian looked up just in time to see her frozen in the glare. Before she could speak, another voice cut through the noise. "This event is not a stunt," Adrian said, his voice calm but commanding. "It is proof that truth can build where lies once destroyed. My wife has nothing to prove to anyone." The crowd murmured. The reporter lowered her microphone, and the noise slowly faded. But as applause began, Elena noticed Colin smirking at her from across the room, holding a phone in his hand. A message flashed on the giant screen behind the stage, an image of the forged design contract that had ruined her career. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adrian stepped forward, his expression turning cold. "Who did this?" he demanded. Security rushed toward the control booth, but it was too late. The guests were already whispering. "Fake marriage," someone said. "Scandal," another voice hissed. Elena felt her knees weaken. Adrian reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "You said it was safe," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You promised me." He tried to speak, but the sound of cameras drowned his words. The event dissolved into chaos. Hours later, back at the mansion, Elena sat in the darkened living room, staring at the ocean through the glass wall. The house that had once felt like a refuge now seemed like a gilded cage again. Adrian entered quietly, his face pale, his tie loosened. "I am sorry," he said. "Rayner planned everything. He wanted to destroy both of us." Elena rose to her feet, anger and grief colliding inside her. "You built this prison, Adrian. You said you would protect me, but all you did was hide me." He took a step closer. "I was trying to keep you safe." She shook her head. "No, you were trying to keep control." The silence that followed was colder than the wind outside. Without another word, she walked past him, leaving the room and the scent of salt and smoke behind. For the first time since the stormy night she arrived, Adrian Vale had no power to stop her. Rain swept across the coast again that night, blurring the lights of the city below. The mansion stood silent, its corridors echoing with the absence of Elena's footsteps. She had left hours earlier, refusing the car Adrian had offered. He watched her disappear through the gates, powerless for the first time in his life. Now, he sat alone in his study, surrounded by stacks of papers and broken trust. On the television, news anchors dissected the scandal. Forged documents, leaked footage, the millionaire marriage built on deception. Every channel carried the same headline. His empire was collapsing, but all he could think of was the look in her eyes when she said he had only wanted control. Across town, Elena stood outside a small community center. The sign above the door read, "Open Hands Project." It was the same place she and Adrian had planned to build together. The lights were off, but inside she saw the boxes of art supplies waiting for children who might never get the chance to use them. She sank to the floor, the rain soaking through her coat. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. When she opened it, her breath caught. A video file showed Colin Rayner in a meeting, boasting about framing her and leaking the forged contract. The voice in the recording was clear, undeniable. Beneath the video, a message appeared. "This belongs to you. Use it wisely." She knew who had sent it. Only one man had the resources to find that proof, Adrian. By morning, the storm had passed. Elena arrived at the Vale corporate headquarters unannounced. Reporters shouted questions as she walked through the crowd, holding the flash drive tightly in her hand. Inside the boardroom, executives argued over who would take control now that Adrian's reputation was ruined. The moment she entered, the room fell silent. Adrian was there, pale and exhausted, his tie undone. When their eyes met, surprise flickered across his face. "I have evidence," she said simply. "The truth about Colin Rayner." The executives watched as she plugged the flash drive into the screen. The video played, Rayner's voice filling the room like a confession. By the end of it, there was no doubt. The man who had destroyed her name had also betrayed Vale Dynamics. When the lights came back on, the chairman turned to Adrian. "If this is genuine, you are cleared." Adrian looked at Elena, his voice rough. "Why would you help me after everything I did?" She met his gaze steadily. "Because you were right about one thing. Sometimes pain teaches you who to trust. And I still believe in what we built, even if it started as a lie." He stepped closer, his eyes dark with emotion. "Elena," she raised a hand, stopping him. "This is not forgiveness, Adrian. It is justice. What you do next will decide if it becomes redemption." Then she turned and walked out, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting light over the city below. For the first time, Adrian Vale followed rather than led. He did not chase her out of guilt, but out of understanding. He knew now that love was not something to possess, it was something to earn. 6 months later, the ocean was calm again. The wind carried the scent of salt and wildflowers through the open windows of the restored community center. Children's laughter echoed across the courtyard, where bright murals now covered the once empty walls. The sign above the door read, "Carter Vale Foundation," painted by Elena's own hand. She stood in the sunlight, her hands stained with blue paint, watching the children hang their artwork on a long string of twine. It had taken months to rebuild her reputation, but the truth had finally won. The video she released had not only cleared her name but also exposed the corruption that had haunted Vale Dynamics. Colin Rayner was arrested, the company's board restructured, and Adrian Vale had stepped down as chief executive officer to start over. Elena heard footsteps behind her and turned. Adrian stood near the doorway, dressed simply in a white shirt and rolled sleeves. The man who once commanded boardrooms, now looked at home among paint-splattered canvases and laughter. "I did not think you would come," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "I would not miss the first day of the foundation we built together." She wiped her hands on a cloth, unsure what to say. The months apart had changed him. The sharpness in his voice was gone, replaced by something quieter, humbler. "I resigned from everything," he said. "No more contracts, no more deals. I wanted to learn what life feels like when it is not calculated." Elena studied him, searching for the man she once feared. "And did you find it?" He nodded. "Yes. I found it in the letters you sent to the children we sponsor, in the projects you finished when I could not face the world. You turned everything I destroyed into something beautiful." Her eyes softened. "You helped too, Adrian. You gave me back the truth." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was the same ring she had once signed for under contract, now reset with a single ocean blue stone. "The first time I gave you this, it was to keep you safe. This time, it is your choice." For a moment, she could not speak. The sound of the waves outside filled the silence. Then she smiled through her tears. "I do not need protection anymore," she said, "but I would like a partner." Adrian's breath caught. "Then let us start again." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. The children cheered from across the courtyard, thinking it was part of the celebration. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the cliffs, they stood together, overlooking the sea. The same waves that had witnessed their chaos now whispered against the shore, calm and forgiving. Adrian spoke quietly. "I once believed that power could fix everything, but it was kindness that saved me." Elena took his hand, and it was love that made it real. They stayed like that until the sky turned gold, the past fading behind them like the tide pulling away. The storm that had brought them together had finally ended, leaving only peace and a promise that this time, nothing between them was written in a contract, but in the heart.